The minute I got there, long, long time ago, I just felt right at home. And I feel that way every single time I go the moment I get there. I've been to Japan 10 times now, and each time I feel exactly the same. Come open-minded, just try to soak it in. Take your time. Don't rush around too much. Life in Japan is in the alleys. And that's where the little restaurants are, and that's where the little clubs. That's the most interesting part.
Thanks for checking in. This is the Japan Travel Pros podcast. Each week, we bring you stories and fresh perspectives about the people and places that make Japan so interesting. Along the way, you'll hear practical advice for planning your own trip. In this episode, we sit down for a chat with our pal Adam. Adam is an alumni client of Japan Travel Pros. In fact, he's been traveling to Japan since the early 1980s. Now, over the years, Adam has seen a lot of Japan, and yet he keeps finding new reasons to come back. We talk about historic towns, onsen hot spring baths, legendary Japanese service, great food, of course, and some of the experiences that have stayed with Adam over the decades of travels in Japan. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. Let's get started.
I was working for my family business in New York. It was a very interesting company called Caswell Massey. It was founded in 1752. My family's involvement began in 1916, and we were importing products from around the world. We also manufactured products. Company still makes the cologne it used to make for George Washington, and I was helping to run the company at that point. We decided to manufacture something in Japan after we checked around different countries for different prices. It was actually a toothbrush, but Japan had good prices. The exchange rate was great at that time. So we started importing. We did very well with it. And the guy who was our agent decided to come to the United States with the manufacturer. He spoke good English. So we had a great time in New York, and he said, why don't you come to Japan? I had to go to LA for a conference. I was then going to go to Europe on a business trip, but I had a great time in LA. I was relaxing. I had friends out there, and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to stay out in LA, and I'm not going to go to Europe. And a friend of mine said, well, I'm going to Hawaii. I have a place there. You can stay with me. Why don't you come? And so I called up my brother in New York. I worked with him at the company, and he said, if you're going that far, why don't you go to Japan? So that was the phrase that changed my life. I said, well, I'll send a telex. That's all they had in those days, and sent it to Maeda-san. And he said, come on, you can stay with me. And 5 days later, I was in Japan. I expected to stay a week. And I just fell in love with it the moment I landed, maybe even before I landed. It was on Japan Airlines. I loved the decor of the airline. I ended up spending 5 weeks there. And I went all over Japan. He took me to a lot of places, and after that, I decided to go off on my own into various parts. Kyushu, and went to Aso and Onsen and Nagasaki. Then I flew down to Kagoshima. Just had the most amazing time. I ended up back with him and then in Tokyo. And I came back to New York. I was living right near New York University. And I said to myself, I'm going to start studying Japanese. So that was in 82. And that's how my love of Japan started.
So it's 1982. You've got this love for Japan. Let's talk a little bit about what it was like and how you could, being in the U.S. at that time, certainly even being in New York, what was available to you in terms of Japanese culture?
Compared to now, it was very little. But my father studied Japanese at Columbia University when he was a student there. And then during World War II, he taught Japanese in the Army to soldiers and officers. And then around 1960 or so, I was very young, and there was a contest that a chemical company called Union Carbide ran. And you had to write a haiku based on a drawing of a woman in a field of flowers. I actually have it right in front of me in my home office. And so he wrote a haiku, and there were thousands and thousands of entries. First prize was an all expenses paid first class trip to Japan. My father won grand prize. He got to go to Japan. It was the only time he ever went. And they went off for 2 weeks to Japan, and they brought back things from Japan. So somehow there was something in the DNA or in the experience that led me to feel something about it. But in terms of what was available in New York at the time, I think more than anything, it was just Japanese food. I mean, nothing like there is today, but there were Japanese restaurants. There was a particular restaurant called Nippon that was on the east side in the 50s that had been around for a long time. My father used to eat there when he was younger. Had a couple of different locations, but I believe it's actually still there. And it must be 70, 80 years or something like that. It's a very traditional Japanese restaurant. And so I used to go there. My first exposure to Japanese fashion was when I ended up in Tokyo and I was told to go to a store called La Forêt in Harajuku. It's almost like a department store, except it's really a series of boutiques on different floors that you walk around. You have these different boutiques, and there may be 8 or 10 on each floor. The yen was 250. Things were very inexpensive. There were designers there that became world famous: Hansai Yamamoto, Comme des Garçons, Comme ça du Mode, and others that nobody had ever heard of. My favorite was a guy named Koshin Sato, who had a brand called Arston Villaju. So over a course of a few days, I bought something like 30 or 40 shirts and 10 pairs of pants and a few sweaters and jackets and things. And I mean, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was extraordinary. I actually still have some of that clothing, and I've given my boys some of it. It's very fashionable stuff. And that was my first exposure to that, and I brought it back. I donated virtually my entire wardrobe that I had beforehand, which was more kind of more standard Brooks Brothers like stuff. And I wore this stuff for years. That was my first exposure to Japanese fashion.
A Japanese department store, it is really a series of boutiques, as you described even La Forêt at the time. A different shopping experience. And Aki is always warning me. It's like, okay, if you need to ask a question like where is something, and that's not that person's department, it's not that person's boutique, don't ask them. Ask the person who's wearing a department store badge or that department store's uniform, because they're different staff. There are other stores that aren't exactly department stores, but they're almost like a mall. You walk in, and if this was the US, they could never pull this off because of, I'm trying to find a nice way to say it, but let's call it shoplifting, just because each store, they're all commingling, right?
Very much so. And, I remember this last time I was in Japan in October when we got together for dinner, and my boys were playing music at the Osaka World Expo. And so I went to Japan for that. But when I was in Tokyo, I went over to Tokyo Eki, Tokyo Station, the department store. I don't remember if it's Daimaru or one of the other ones. And the station itself were completely intermingled. I couldn't even tell where the station began and the department store ended. It was incredible. And these in that area, they had usually the food is downstairs, but in that particular one, the sweets and these gifts and things were on the main floor. It was so vibrant and so alive and so colorful. It was pretty extraordinary, actually. You could just see people looking for things to bring on their way home. And it was a great experience. So, yes, department stores in Japan are quite different, but everybody is very much in that area anyway. They're very much in their own area. They're behind the counter for their stuff. They're experts at it, and they really know their stuff. And then there are people manning things. And that's another thing. In American department stores, you will often have to find somebody. You could be looking around for 5 minutes before you can find somebody who's able to help you. And in Japan, it's a different experience.
The service experience, they won't hold your hand per se, but they might even leave their post and walk you over to the department that you're looking to go to. Very much part of Japanese service in general. That experience is, instead of just saying, hey, it's over there, or you can't point. You actually have to either, at the very least, use open hands and say, it's over this way, hi, kochira desu, or they might walk with you to where you're going.
My overall experience of how people take care of each other in Japan is great, and they're very polite and they're friendly, and they use polite Japanese when they're talking to you. And I have heard stories of Americans going into certain restaurants and being refused to be served. I've never experienced that, maybe because I speak a bit of Japanese. Generally speaking, it's been a great experience. On the surface, you go to Japan and there are certain things that are people have in common, where the countries have in common about freedom of speech and freedom of press. And obviously it's much more safe in Japan than it is in the United States, depending on where you are. But you can go almost anywhere in Japan and there's virtually no street level crime of any kind, which is really terrific. So Part of it is it's a much more of a homogenous culture. So everybody, they get along with each other. They take care of each other. If you're going to hurt somebody else, you're hurting yourself.
We've talked a bit about this in previous episodes. I keep throwing out the word freedom. Now, freedom means different things to different people. I used an example in the other episode where I said, hey, if you have cash on you in Japan, for example, that's your freedom. If you want freedom, that's good freedom to have, as you know, because cash is taken a lot of places where credit cards are not. But for Japanese, they're very quick to say, well, freedom comes with responsibility.
That is very true. And freedom unbridled without responsibility doesn't work. But I think that Japan has figured out how to do it. So it's a great place to go. I mean, that's why I feel so at home there. And like I said before, the minute I got there, long time ago, I just felt right at home. And I feel that way every single time I go. The moment I get there, I've been to Japan 10 times now, and each time I feel exactly the same. Tokyo is such a modern and exciting city. When this last time I was there, I definitely did not take the subway, and I didn't take any buses, and I didn't take any taxis. I just walked everywhere. And even when it was raining, I was walking. And I just wanted to experience the city and feel it. And there's so many different aspects to it. So it's very, very exciting. And to me, I felt welcome everywhere. But I've been to a lot of other places in Japan. I remember on one of my early trips to Japan, I went to an outdoor hot spring, a Rotemburo, up in Gunma Prefecture, called Takaragawa Onsen. If you look up the pictures of it, you'll see the pictures of the ravine going through the forest, and you can sit in these little pools where they gather the water and things, and it's just so incredibly peaceful. And there's a ryokan there that you can stay at and eat your kaiseki meal, and it's a wonderful experience. I had to take the Shinkansen, the bullet train, and then a train, and then a bus, and then they had to pick me up in a car. So it was like four stages to getting there, and I was alone to get there. And one of the sweaters that I bought in Harajuku at La Forêt the time before that, which was my favorite sweater, I still have it. I forgot it on the bus, and I was really distraught about it. And so I told them at the hotel, and that night it was delivered back to me. So that would
Yeah.
never happen here. People it's not that people would steal it necessarily, it's just that they wouldn't take the time. They'd put it in the lost and found or something, and that would be it. But this way, here they go out of their way to accommodate. It's great.
Yes, we've had clients over the years, a few clients periodically, somebody will not lose because it always comes back, but misplace something or leave something. In Japan, the lesson there is contact either the transit company and find their lost and found, or the closest koban, the closest police station or police box as they call it here, and chances are it will turn up.
Yeah, not surprising.
Let's talk a little bit about onsen and ryokan since you mentioned that one in Gunma. I mean, look, Hakone is beautiful, but it is heavily touristed now, and it's relatively easy to get to from Tokyo or even on the way back from Kyoto, etc. The more extensive journey pays off, would you say, Adam, by going to some of these smaller onsen towns, for example?
I have a love of going to these small places, even though I love Tokyo and I've been there many times and I've gone to Kyoto and seen much of that and have been a lot to Osaka because I have friends there. I love going to the old places. And, you and I have talked when you were helping me arrange my trip last time, like, where are the old places, and I love going to the onsen towns. And I actually haven't been to enough of them. And I want to go up to north to Ginzan Onsen, and I haven't even been to some of the more touristy ones like Arima Onsen, and I haven't been to Kinosaki. And so there are so many different places, but capturing a feeling of these smaller towns of what Japan is like and was like without all of the modern accoutrements, then you have a feeling of history and of culture. And this last time, actually, I had a day in between when my boys left, me being in Tokyo for some meetings. And so I went to Nagoya, and I figured, I'm alone. So what should I do? I don't normally do guided tours, but I booked a tour. I've always wanted to walk on the Nakasendo Trail. So I booked a tour, and there were maybe 20 people on it. There was a bus that picked you up in Nagoya, and it took you to one of the towns. There's 69 outposts. They're really outposts rather than towns. Some are a little bit bigger than others, and some of them have some very small inns that you can stay in, and some places to get something to eat. And obviously, you can get tea and sweets and gifts and things. But they're beautiful and they're old. And I forget offhand the name of the first one where they brought us to, but you're not allowed to sell anything. The building there, if there, you can give it to somebody can inherit it, but if there's nobody to inherit it, the town inherits it, and they can't change it. And it's hasn't been changed for 400 or 500 years or whatever it is, and it looks it and feels not in a way that it's falling apart. That they keep it up, but it's just beautiful. And then we walk for 4 hours up and down these mountainsides to the next town, which was a bit bigger, next outpost, but the whole experience was incredible. Along the way, there was a building or a house shop that the guy was giving free green tea to anybody, and he had a chalkboard outside that people would write the countries that they were from, and he would count how many people would come, and then at the end of the day he would erase it and it would start over the next day. And that was his life. I mean, he lived there and that's what he did, and it's way up in the mountains. Yeah, a really great experience. I also remember one of the other trips, I took my boys up to the Hida Takayama area, which I guess is kind of in the foothills of the mountains of the Japanese Alps or whatever they call it. And I went there because I wanted to have Hida beef, and Hida is one of the Wagyus, and the town of Takayama was just beautiful, and it was old buildings, hundreds and hundreds of years old. You can wander there and along the river and these streams and these creeks and other things, and just imagine what it was like years ago. And if you felt like buying something, I actually bought a hat I bought there. I really love it. It says Reiwa, which is, of course, the name of the current emperor. So I wear it around, and so that town was just beautiful, and Hida was great, and the beef was unbelievable. Up to that point, it was the best beef I ever had in my life, and I had one better one in Tokyo this past October, which I forget, is it Miyazaki, or I forget the other kind of wagyu, one of the other wagyus, but it was pretty extraordinary. It was at an izakaya in Shibuya.
It could have been Miyazaki beef. It could have been Matsuzaka beef. They're both good.
Yes, this was grilled. The heat up beef was interesting because we were at this small place in Takayama, and it was called Dining Bull. So for anybody listening to this, go to Dining Bowl. It's worth it. And actually, I was with a friend recently who had also gone without speaking to me. We hadn't coordinated. He decided to go up to Takayama, and he actually went to Dining Bowl also. So it was pretty amazing. And it's a small little place with like 4 or 5 tables with fluorescent lights and an tiny little open kitchen, and some older guy cooking these steaks. And so we ordered it, and he brings them to the table, and they're like the size of a sirloin or something, but it looked almost blanched. It looked like the color of boiled beef. And we were thinking, oh, this is going to be disappointing because I like, it'd be roasted or grilled or whatever. And it was unbelievable. My son went, "Oh my God!" He had that kind of reaction to it, and it was really extraordinary. But this one, I have a friend, a very interesting guy. He's a Japanophile like me, and we always talked about being in Japan at the same time. He makes a line of wines, expensive wines, under his own name that are made specifically to work with Japanese food. So it happens we were in Japan at the same time. We coordinated, and he said, "Well, let's go izakaya hopping." And so we went to the first one. He knew the owner, and he served us this beef, and it was like nothing I'd ever had before. It was grilled, and it was like butter.
If you're looking at a trip to Japan and everything is just starting to feel a little much, we can help. There comes a point when more information just makes your head spin. We get it. Now that's where Japan Travel Pros comes in. What we do is we help you sort through your plans, focus on what actually matters to you, and then you can make decisions with more confidence. Go to japantravelpros.com/plan to book a session. That's japantravelpros.com/plan.
You know what I didn't do when I was there, which I really want to do, I did not go to Shirakawa. The thatched roof village. I definitely would like to go there.
A very popular way to do this is to go in either direction. Starting in Takayama, you can experience Shirakawa-go as a day trip from Takayama and come back, or continue onward and then continuing to Kanazawa and spending a few days in Kanazawa after that, or vice versa. Either direction can work.
Kanazawa is great. I spent a number of days there with my boys, and we had a great time. There is the Suzuki Museum or house there. He was one who really brought a lot of, I guess, Zen Buddhism to the West and wrote a number of books about it. And this is a very interesting meditative place to go. It's very modern, but very interesting. Also, they have a modern art museum in Kanazawa, which is one of the best museums I've ever been to. It's innovative and interesting and surprising. It's a good place to go. It's not, there are old parts of Kanazawa, and it's not as crowded as Kyoto is. So worth going to.
I agree, and it's relatively easy to get between Kyoto and Kanazawa, really just a couple of hours. Speaking about the Nakasendo then as well, and particularly the Kiso Valley in that section. So backing it up a bit for our listeners, the Nakasendo Trail is essentially, think about like what the Pony Express would have been in the US back in the day, for example. It's the old postal trail. And you can still visit different sections of it. Adam, tell people what they can expect to see in these towns.
Even though they're small, there's a lot to see. Firstly, you're just embedded with the history of it, and it definitely helps that it was a beautiful day, because it's a little bit up in the hills and the mountains, and you get this blue sky coming through with the white clouds, and it was just gorgeous. And we started in Nagiso and ended up in Magome. There are, all of the buildings are old, and the first town at the beginning of it, there were a few shops, so you could stop and get something to drink. You could get tea, you could get water if you wanted to buy gifts. Our guide, we had an American guide who spoke Japanese, and she was great and very knowledgeable. So she was telling us about the different inns that are there. In the old days, somebody would come and stay there, but depending on their social level, if they were a merchant, they could get in there. But then if samurais came and needed to stay there, they would get kicked out. It could be in the middle of the night, and if somebody higher than a samurai came, the same thing would happen. I don't know if a daimyo or somebody else would come along that way, but possibly with their retinue. So that was interesting. But these days, you can actually book them. I don't know what the rooms are like or anything, but it was really quite lovely. And then the homes are beautiful. I remember one that had a water wheel, and there's a kind of a small little creek of water. It's only, I mean, it's a channel that maybe is about a foot wide, an irrigation thing. And I don't know if it was used in the old days for sewage, but now it's not. And the water wheel was turning, and there are beautiful flowers everywhere, and it's just wonderful. And then the pathway along the way, some of it was paved with stone. Some of it was just dirt. Some of it was quite vigorous. You were in the middle of the forest. Reminded me of being in Muir Woods in San Francisco, north of San Francisco. And other parts were flat. And then we came across this little plateau, and this field opened up, and there was that house with the guy offering the free tea. We had brought snacks or lunch with us, so there was these tables that were set up in this wooden covering that looked like the whole thing had been built hundreds of years ago for travelers, specifically to be able to stop and have some shade from the sun. And we ate there, and then we walked on, and then we got to the other town, and it was a little bit bigger, and lots of gift shops, but not touristy, and just a little, like I was saying, places to eat and drink, but a small little historical kind of hamlet, really. These are outposts, like I said before, for travelers who are going along the road. And so everything was geared towards the traveler. What are the things that they needed passing through? Did they need, I don't know if they had horses, or they needed work on the hooves of the horses, or they needed something else done. There were merchants there who were able to do various things to help the traveler.
That's right. And Adam, how did you find the walking in between the towns? Now, you got lucky with the weather, because it was looking like iffy. It might be a rainy day. You actually got a sunny day there. How are those trails, first off, in terms of, let's say, walking ability, or if somebody has maybe some minor walking challenges, mobility challenges, for example, how would you rate or recommend those trails?
I think that if you have mobility challenges, this going doing the walk wouldn't be the thing to do. Some of it is uphill, some of it is downhill, some of it is paved with stone, some of it is not. I think that if you have mobility issues, you may want to not do that. But there are bus tours that take you to the town. So in the town itself, you can walk around because it's paved with stones usually, but it's not muddy or anything like that. And if somebody were in a wheelchair, for example, somebody could take you to the various places. So I think you could experience those things that way. If it was raining, it would have been kind of muddy. You know, you would have had to have the right shoes, and I'm sure that these tours go on even if it's muddy. They say there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. So just make sure that you're prepared with the right clothing. And they do get rain in Japan a lot during the rainy season, so there's plenty of gear to buy there if you needed something.
Let's talk about food a little bit, Adam. You've mentioned beef and you've mentioned chicken, and we got to meet up back in October last year in Osaka, and we had yakitori.
Well, the only thing I don't eat personally is shellfish. I'll eat anything else for the most part. I don't eat a lot of pork. My wife has not been. She's allergic to fish, so that's an issue for her with dashi and fish sauce and things. But and we'll deal with that one way or the other when we do go. She was supposed to come the previous time, so I had my Japanese tutor who speaks fluent. He's American but speaks fluent Japanese. Write out for me on a piece of paper. They're allergic to this and that and the other thing, and etc. So I had it all in Japanese and had a photo of it in my phone, and I had it in a piece of paper in my wallet. So that was what I was prepared to do. In regard to when I'm there myself, or with people who don't have any dietary restrictions, then I just have my own of not wanting shellfish. So I just don't order it. It hasn't been a problem for me. My favorite Japanese food by far is okonomiyaki. When I first got to Japan, I flew into Narita in Tokyo and I stayed overnight at a hotel. And the next morning, I took a flight to Osaka because I had a business colleague, my friend, who was hosting me, and I didn't even realize I could take the bullet train. I flew, and he picked me up, brought me to his house, and that afternoon, his wife served me okonomiyaki, and it was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. For those who don't know, it's kind of I describe it as a pancake omelet crepe mixture based on green cabbage, generally speaking, with a batter around it, and you fry it. And you add all kinds of incredible seasonings and ingredients into it, and they put these fish flakes and seaweed, even mayonnaise on it. It's really fantastic. It's a peasant food. There are two styles, the Osaka and the Hiroshima, and I like the Osaka one better. Maybe that's because that was the first one that I had. But that's a great, great, great food. So I encourage anybody going to Japan to have it. Many of the times when I go to Tokyo, when I get there, first thing we do is go to this okonomiyaki restaurant in Nihonbashi. It's one that a friend of mine turned me on to and took us there, and it's one of my favorite places. So I highly recommend it.
It's a great food. It's certainly a comfort food, as you mentioned, a soul food, if you will, and it's versatile.
In Los Angeles, where I live, there is a store. I don't. It must be. I imagine they have them over in Japan, but the name is Chinchikurin, and it's a Hiroshima style, so it's more layered rather than all mixed together. There's one in Little Tokyo, and there's one on Sawtelle, which is they call it kind of like Little Osaka. It's a smaller area in the middle of town, but it's very good. So I do go to those places when I can, and I love taking my boys there, and they're just as much. It's like my father, myself, and my boys. It's like three generations of loving Japan.
That's so cool. I think there's a branch in Shimbashi in Tokyo, the one that you're talking about, and it has, at least the Shimbashi branch has Hiroshima carp gear in pennants and signs all over the store. I think that's a Chinchikurin
I think you're
branch.
right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah.
There is a debate. It's one of those things in Japan, highly debated, which one is better, Osaka style or Hiroshima style. And as you said, Adam, it comes down to emotion and comfort and probably more psychological factors than anything, I imagine.
I think it's sort of like what you're used to. And I mean, for me, mixing all of the ingredients together. I enjoy that more. I've also seen in the Chinchikuran ones, which is the Hiroshima style, it's layered, but they also put yakisoba noodles in it. Just with the okonomiyaki itself, I doesn't fill me. It doesn't stuff me.
That's good traveler advice. Okonomiyaki for lunch. If you're going to have that, you probably don't want it too heavy because you're presumably going around doing some sightseeing or some type of experience in the afternoon. Now, in Hiroshima, after your sightseeing, it's good for lunch, but maybe even better for dinner. 4 floors of different okonomiyaki diner type restaurants. It's all open. Go in. It's called Okonomi Mura, literally means Okonomi Village, and that's all they have. And just find one that has a couple of seats open, however many seats you need in your party. Go there, you're going to enjoy it, and it is a very Hiroshima experience.
I've never been to Hiroshima, so that is the next trip. I'm definitely going down that way. And as you know, I had it planned, and then I had to change my plans. I'm dying to go to that place, so I'll probably eat there every meal. So be interesting to try, some of the different places.
Yeah, and it consistently will hear feedback from visitors to Japan about Hiroshima saying the friendliest people they met were in Hiroshima and some of the best food that they ate was in Hiroshima. If that's not 2 great reasons to go there, I don't know what else is. Obviously, there's the history and the sort of humanity component to it that's there as well. And of course, nearby, just across the water, there is Miyajima with the famous Itsukushima Shrine and the torii the gate, the torii that you can visit. You can walk out to when it's low tide because that's literally the ocean floor, or you can see it at high tide in the water. So a very popular place among Japanese to go to and among visitors to Japan both.
All of that is on the list of places that I want to go.
You mentioned Ginzan Onsen, Kusatsu Onsen. These are classic onsen towns. Again, we do. Sometimes people will bristle. They look forward to, they see the photos. They say, Ginzan Onsen, that looks fantastic. And then you say how much is involved to get there from Tokyo or from etc. And they say, well, I'm losing 2 days to go to that onsen town. Is it worth it? That's a very individual choice, of course.
Yeah, Ginzan Onsen, I think, is the town that Spirited Away was based on, right? And that inn where the people, eat you or whatever they did, is that onsen. Because I know when I saw the picture, I said, "Wait, that looks familiar." So yeah, I'd like to go one of these days when I get up and go north. I'll do that. The problem for me is I don't want to drive on the left side of the road, and especially when I can't read all the signs. So I can't drive there. You're stuck having to take public transportation and the last leg of it a taxi or something like that. But to me, especially if you're willing to spend and want to spend a few days there at an onsen, at a spa, and relax and really take it all in, and maybe you have some work on your laptop, maybe you want to read or do whatever. To me, those things are really worthwhile. I've really enjoyed doing those things.
When coming to Japan, as you know, what tends to stand out first and foremost is the modern, not necessarily postmodern these days, but just that Showa sort of modern, which is 60s, 70s, 80s architecture, not just block after block, but neighborhood after neighborhood looking like that. You've got to seek out the historic places. It requires a little more effort, a little more planning, but probably pretty good payoff. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. It does take some research. You were very helpful, Aki, and you were very helpful for me to find places. And sometimes it's not so easy to find the places. You can go onto YouTube, you can go onto TikTok and all of that. A lot of people find things on there, but you don't necessarily know what you're getting. And a lot of people are kind of selling stuff and you don't know. So I think it does require some local knowledge and help. Years ago, when I was coming to Japan in the early days, I did go to unusual places. So, like I said earlier, on my first trip, I took the overnight boat to Aso in Kyushu. And then by bus, I went to Onsen, where the sulfur springs are, and to Nagasaki and Kagoshima, which I flew down on the bottom. And they were really interesting and quite different. And Kagoshima was great. I never forget, I got there late at night. I was staying at a regular hotel, and I went to sleep. And I woke up in the morning, I opened up the blinds, and I'm looking out at Sakurajima volcano, and there's steam coming out of it, and it was like filled up half the window. It was incredible. And I ended up taking the ferry across, took a taxi up to the top of it, and I walked down. It was an incredible experience. And towards the bottom, I met a woman, an American woman. We ended up spending the day together, the rest of the day together. We went to it was a big hut that it was a thatched roof, almost like a pavilion kind of thing, kind of open air, serving yams that he was cooking on an open coal fire right there. And we had these incredible yams just sitting there, and it was the most amazing experience. And then I took the ferry back. I went back to the hotel, and I'm walking around and the hotel, and I was in the area where they had like some conference rooms and things. And so I heard something, and the door was a bit ajar. So I had these double doors. So today I would be more cautious, I guess, but I opened the doors, and in there I'm staring at 12 sumo wrestlers eating lunch. It was the most incredible. They all turn and look at me like, "What are you doing in here?" And it was the most incredible thing. And today I would have gone in and tried to speak in Japanese and say hello and whatever. And there I was just a little embarrassed. And it was my first time in Japan. And I pretty quickly closed the doors and left. But I have a very fond memory of that moment. And so being in that area, it's very different. I remember going to a restaurant where the gardens down there are different somehow, and I did that. Then another time I was in Matsuyama, one of the other islands, Shikoku, right? So I went to Matsuyama, and which is the major city on Shikoku, and I went to Dogo Onsen. Dogo Onsen, as you know, is the waters have been used for 3,000 years. And so I go in, it's an old wooden building, of course, and I pay my coins and I go in, and this big room, and there's this really big bath, and everything is slate, like the floor is slate, and the whole bath is slate, and it's very, very hot. I could not get in. I think it was something like 110, 112 degrees. Couldn't get in. I could put my toe in, and that was enough. But the water was, in a fountain coming into it and spilling over the side onto the slate, which was slanted away from the bath. And so the slate was warm. It was getting the hot water. And so I just lay down on the slate, and because the whole room was warm and hot, and just for like an hour, and I fell asleep there with the water coming around me. And I never forget there was some guy, he must have been 80 years old, came, you don't have your clothes on, skinny, tall, just walked right up to the bath and walked right in, like instantly without any hesitation or anything. It was unbelievable to see that. So Dogo Onsen was great. Another time in Kyoto, I was very fortunate to have had a business relationship with the Urasenke family. And the Urasenke was the ones who codified tea ceremony. And I knew I had met the younger son, who was never going to be tea master because it's always passed along to the oldest son. But he was importing products from Japan, and he was interested in importing products from my family business. So I got to know them a bit, and they took me to this 400-year-old restaurant. It was November, and it was a kaiseki traditional meal there were like 15 courses, and every single course was from the matsutake mushroom. And it was the most extraordinary experience. And we had this tatami room, and they opened up the shoji screens, and we had an entire garden just for us, just for ourselves. They was just for that room. It was really incredible. So finding these little places is really great. I highly recommend that part of Japan, not just to do the modern stuff.
A few of the many different sides of Japan that somebody can see. And what an experience you had with those sumo dorikushi, and to open the doors and see them. And that must have been quite a meal. I know you closed the doors pretty quickly, but that must have been not a small meal that they were enjoying at that hotel. One remaining question for you, Adam. Someone coming for their first time, and obviously the first time to Japan in 2026 or 2027 and beyond is a little bit different than how it was in the 80s for you and me. Both of us had our first time in Japan almost around the same time. What do you recommend, though? Some things have changed, but some things have not. And you've certainly been in Japan and so many times since. Somebody who's planning for the first time, what would your advice be, Adam?
For people who have never been there are certain things that people feel are you have to do. We certainly have to spend time in Tokyo. It really there's so much to see and experience in Tokyo. It's worth spending a few days there. So, I mean, I recommend people go to Japan for at least 2 weeks. I think that if you go for a week, it's maybe not quite enough, especially if you're coming from the States and you've got jet lag. But maybe you could do 10 days and, you got like 2 weekends and the week in between. You could do that. You can manage 2 weeks, it's worth it. Spending, 4 days in Tokyo or something is really great. And you should get some advice on where to go. And there are certain areas that are very well known and very interesting. And then there are smaller areas. Tokyo's got like 35 or so different named sections, and there's some interesting ones, the ones that are very popular, like Shinjuku and Shibuya and Ginza and all that. But then you've got the one that has all the bookstores.
Kanda Jimbocho has the bookstores and also the curry shops, both since you mentioned curry earlier.
Right, right. Yeah, and I've not been there. And then there's Shimokitazawa that has all the vintage clothing stores. We spent an entire day there. I think we must have gone to 50 vintage clothing stores. My kids had the best time in the world. And so that was really fun. Finding those little places like that is really worthwhile inside of Tokyo itself. And then obviously everybody feels they need to go to Kyoto, and there's a lot to discover in Kyoto. I know that I was listening to your previous podcast with your previous guest, and he was talking about how much there is to experience in Kyoto, beyond what people feel and it's a must see. That's an individual decision, but I understand where he's coming from. I've been there. I've probably been there every time I've been to Japan, so I've probably been there 10 times. I've been to Osaka a lot. Osaka's a lot of fun. It's a very modern city. If you go to the nightclub area in Minami and Dotonbori, the canal and street there, it's a lot of fun. But again, if you've spent time walking around Shinjuku or Shibuya, maybe you don't need to go. I think you could probably skip it. I would recommend that people go to an onsen town. And again, I haven't been to that many of them, but I've seen the pictures and I know about them. And I think that just experiencing old Japan is great. And then so I would do that, and then I would pick like one other area to go and spend a few days there. I picked Kanazawa one time, and then I did Hida Takayama another. Previously, I went down to Matsuyama. I went up to Hokkaido. So I picked different areas that it took a little bit of time to get to, but I decided that I wanted to explore those areas. So if you did Tokyo and Kyoto and an onsen town and one area that takes a little bit of time to get to that has elements of old Japan, then I think you've got a rich trip experience. I also think people should walk the Nakasendo Trail. I just am a very big fan of the experience that I had there.
What would be one or two, if you wish, a strategy or an attitude or a philosophy that you'd like to leave with people that you think will pay off maybe in multiples on their first trip or on their next trip to Japan?
Japan is very easy. It's very easy to manage because it's safe, it's very organized, and things are on time, it's clean, you could eat anywhere, you could drink the water anywhere. Obviously, it is challenging to read the signs. You won't be able to unless you speak some Japanese. Not everybody speaks English, but there certainly are people who do. And so I think you come open minded to just try to soak it in. Take your time. Don't rush around too much. So, there are certain places that you go, like if you're going to India or something, for example. I haven't been to India, but there are parts that are wealthy and parts that are not. And there are people who feel, well, I don't like the disparity between the rich and the poor. You're not going to see that much in Japan. It does exist, but the difference is nothing like what it is in some of these other countries. So, in some of the places you go to, you have to kind of be a little protective of yourself and knowing that you're going to experience some things that you may or may not be comfortable with. That's not going to happen in Japan. There's so much to experience. So I think be open. I think you should do research beforehand. I think you should read, pick the areas carefully, and do as much research as you can and go to the places that are of interest. There's some people who want to go to the shrines and the temples. Other people want to go to the ninja museum. They're very different from each other. So if you have kids, they may have certain interests. And you want to make sure that the kids aren't bored and that they do things that they would like to do. And you make your plans individually.
That's right. Now, we had a client the other day say, I want to be uncomfortable a little bit. Like, we want our creature comforts in the hotel and whatnot, but I also want to get out there and experience some discomfort. His attitude almost did make me think of Anthony Bourdain and sort of,
Mhm.
intentionally, voluntarily signing up for a little bit of discomfort or uncomfortable feelings to have that sense of reward and accomplishment on the other end of it.
You can go to ryokans. So stay at an inn, sleep on the floor. What's that other type of place you can stay? It's not a ryokan. It's something a little bit lower.
Minshuku
Yeah,
is one of
minshuku.
them.
You could stay at a minshuku, like an
Yeah.
inn or something. I think going to smaller hole-in-the-wall restaurants is a great thing to do, and just try the food. You don't even know what you're gonna get. You don't know how good it's gonna be. It may be the best meal you've ever had. So I think that is good. Walk a lot. Don't rely on public transportation so much or on taxis and things. Just try to walk and experience and explore. I tell this to people who are going to Japan, especially in the bigger towns. Life in Japan is in the alleys. And there are alleys all over Japan. You go to Tokyo and there are these little alleys, off of the big streets and things. And that's where the little restaurants are. And that's where the little clubs and the karaoke places and the other stuff are. That's the most interesting part to me.
Thanks again to Adam for joining us. One thing I kept coming back to while we were having that conversation is that Japan's not really one of those things you can ever truly finish. Every trip gives you something different. Sometimes it's a destination you've wanted to visit for years. Other times it's just ducking into one of those alleys that Adam was talking about, getting into a small restaurant or izakaya, ending up having a conversation that you were not at all expecting. I think that's part of what keeps people like Adam coming back. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you follow the pod, maybe leave us a rating or a review. And hey, if you know someone who's planning a trip to Japan, why not share it with them? It really does help us reach more travelers like you. You can also find more episodes and travel resources at japantravelpros.com. More great episodes coming up, all kinds of Japan stories on the way. Thanks so much for listening to the end. Until next time, safe travels.